No better place to start than the two guys on the offensive line, the first-round pick, Andrew Thomas. Then obviously you get to fifth-round pick, Shane Lemieux. And I guess we could talk about these guys together since they play the same position. Jeff and I talked a lot about the Giants' offensive line on Monday, so people kind of know my opinion about it, so I'll just give my real quick take, and then I'll let you take it from there, and we could talk about it a little bit. To me, I feel pretty good that Andrew Thomas is a starting caliber NFL left tackle at this point, given his performance the second half of the year. Do I know how good he's going to be? I do not. I think he has a lot of room to improve. Shane Lemieux, I have more questions about. To me, at least, I don't think he showed enough for me to just hand him the starting job next year and say, kid, go get it. We trust you. I wouldn't mind seeing him compete, whether that's with Will Hernandez or with another veteran, things of that nature. What I like about Lemieux is that he's smart, he's tough, and I think he has the right mentality to play the position. But some of the one-on-one pass protection stuff worries me a little bit. And Andrew Thomas has all the tools you want to see. So those are my take on those two guys in terms of what I thought of their rookie years. I can give some of the particular stats on their pressures and things like that if fans want them. But that's how I look at those two guys, Lance, in terms of moving forward.
Well, just to give you an idea, Andrew Thomas played just over 96% of the snaps. So, I mean, he was pretty much out there, even though they had a little bit of a rotation and he had an internal punishment that cost him a start. For the most part, I mean, he was out there. So you've got a nice sample size to look at over the course of his rookie year. Shane Lemieux was more of a rotational guy, did not play the whole season. He was just under 50% in terms of the offensive snaps. As far as the outlook, I would agree with you. I agree with your assessment on Andrew Thomas. I think his second half of the season was much more consistent and impressive than the first half of the season, and that's understandable. Listen, he didn't have a conventional offseason. He was very much tested right out of the gates. We talked about the caliber of the defenses that he was going to be playing, the level of pass rushers that he was going to go up against, and I think it was sort of a baptism by fire. But I think as the season progressed, he got more and more comfortable. Things steadied off. So you like the results. You like the trajectory in the second half of the season. But like anything else, you want to see him go out there and do it consistently from start to finish. That's why I think the start of next year, the start of the 2021 campaign, regardless of how this offseason plays out and whether they have spring workouts or not, I think is important because you want to know that the first half of this past season was just the nature of transitioning from college to the pros, getting a feel for a new offense and so forth, as opposed to, well, you know, maybe it takes them 2 to 3 games to really get into rhythm every single year. So that's number one. As far as Lemieux is concerned, I would agree with you as well. I think that there were positive flashes. You love the toughness. You love the attitude. But I don't know if there's enough right now to say, hey, the Giants have one of their starting guards locked up with Shane Lemieux. That's why I'm going to go back to something I emphasized, John, on yesterday's program when Paul and I were on. And it got into the conversation about Kevin Zeitler. And from a financial perspective, if the Giants want to retain some of the defensive players, do they have to consider parting ways with him? And I said, well, wait a minute. You know, before you start to tally up the money, you've got to look at what you have at the guard spot. And Will Hernandez did not play a lot of snaps as the season progressed and as he returned from COVID. So, you know, he becomes a question mark in terms of what this coaching staff thinks of him. Then we talked about Lemieux still has some rawness to him. So Zeitler is still your staple at guard. I would be in no hurry to get rid of the staple at that position when the other two guards are young, and the other guy is somebody that is at the point where he's had a number of seasons under his belt, but you just wonder how the coaching staff is looking at him. I would be, once again, in no rush to part ways with a guy like Zeitler as a result of that.
Yeah, I would like to see a veteran, at least one, be at that guard position to be a stabilizing force, whether it's left or right, competing with those two guys, Zeitler, somebody else, whatever. I'm not willing to just say, all right, here are 2 young guys, you guys go get it. You need to have somebody in there that I think, I agree, Lance, that has a larger body of work that you can be very confident in.
Well, John, especially not to cut you off,
Nick
Gates, remember, just finished his first season as a center, too. So, you know, that's more of a reason why you want experience in one of the guard spots.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a theme when we get to the Giants' third-round pick, too, which we could talk about. And I guess we can get there right now. But Lance, very quickly on Andrew Thomas, just to give people an idea, he allowed 60 pressures this year. 39 of them came in the first 7 games. Only 21 came in the final 9. So I think that shows the progress that he made from a pass protection standpoint. So let's get to the third offensive lineman. I didn't put him with Lemieux and Thomas because, he wasn't really a starter the whole year, much like Lemieux was the second half of the year and Thomas was throughout the entire year. And that's Matt Parrott, who got a lot of snaps over the course of the year, kind of rotating in with Cam Fleming at right tackle. He got up to 169 snaps. Late in the year, he had an ankle injury. He was also on the COVID-19 list for a week, so he didn't play quite as much, Lance, late in the year. I think he played a little bit better earlier in the year, actually. Now, it's tough to tell when you're only playing 10 to 12 snaps a game to really get a feel for how well somebody's playing based on the play call. It's just a very small sample size. So I think what we saw from Parrott is kind of what we saw from what we thought about him before the year, where he was going to be a developmental guy. You like his tools, still has a lot of work to do getting stronger and becoming a stronger player, but also honing his craft and his technique. So much like with the guards, to me, Lance, that's a spot where I want to have some type of veteran there competing with him, whether that's you bring back Cam Fleming, whether that you bring back Nate Solder, or you bring back somebody else. I need to have Matt Parrott show up this offseason in 2021 saying, all right, I need to beat out this guy. And if he beats out that guy, great. That's the ideal scenario. That's what you want. But I don't think you can count on him being ready without having somebody else there that you're confident in to put in to start if you have to.
It's very similar to our assessment to the guard spot.
Yep.
You want at least one veteran there. So I don't see why tackle should be any different because, once again, even though Andrew Thomas is heading in the right direction based on his second half, you still want to know that there's a veteran on the opposite side, especially if, once again, Zeitler's status could very well be up in the air. So if you go with a younger guard, do you want then a young tackle next to a young guard, next to a center entering year number 2? Okay, that's a lot of youth and inexperience all next to one another. So that would be more of a reason why I think you got to be careful in terms of what you do at that tackle spot and also depth-wise. I thought Matt Parrott, the game that he filled in for Andrew Thomas when Thomas didn't start, I thought he handled himself very nicely at the left tackle spot. And then I think we've seen some flashes in terms of his rotating in at the right tackle spot. But I don't think there's enough of a sample size to say you go into 2021 and hey, Andrew Thomas and Matt Parrott are our two tackles at the starting spots, and there's no question about it. I think you want him more of being that swing guy where you can continue to rotate him in, continue to develop him, and continue to show that he's able to make the improvements in the areas that you pointed out to him over the course of this season. So that's why a Cam Fleming, a Nate Solder, just like I talked about Kevin Zeitler, the presence of an established veteran is important because I think the Giants going into 2021, once again, my personal opinion, I think they'd feel much better if they say, hey, our second-year player is more of our rotational guy as opposed to the guy that we're anticipating is going to play every single snap, every single game.
Right. Now, if he shows up in the offseason and wins that job, great. That's fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
But, yes, I agree. I think that has to be an option that's in your back pocket. All right, let's go over to Xavier McKinney, Lance, the Giants' second-round pick. A really small sample size for him. But the last 2 games, he did play a lot. 82 snaps at free safety over the course of the year, 84 snaps in the nickel kind of slot corner spot, and 47 in the box. So we talked about when the Giants drafted him, how he was versatile and he could do everything he wanted out of the safety position. Well, despite the fact he didn't show up until after the bye, and he played 131 snaps from week 14 through 16, and then he played another 80 in the final week. The Giants used him in different roles in different spots, and I think you have to be encouraged by it. Again, it's a small sample size, but I think you have to feel pretty good about the fact that he's going to be a good part of this safety rotation next year and can be an effective NFL player for a long time.
And I think based on what you just laid out, I would probably label him as the most intriguing player of the 2020 rookie class entering 2021 because, like you said, we got a glimpse in the latter part of the season, but we really have yet to see what his true potential is as the volume of snaps goes up. I think it's encouraging what he was able to do, and I also like the Giants' approach too, John. I don't think you could overlook that. When he was ready to go, they didn't just throw him in and say, hey, we're going to have you play 60 to 70% of the snaps in a single game.
Well, Lance, you know what? Real quick, I have the numbers for you. In week 12, real quick, he played 26 snaps in his first 2 weeks. The next 3 weeks, he played 130, so he kind of went up to, 40 snaps a week, and then he played 80 in that final week. So there was a pretty steady increase over the course of his final 6 games.
which I think was a great game plan.
Yeah, I agree.
Because we're talking about a significant injury where, he didn't have much of the beginning of the season to get acclimated because he went from the end of training camp to having to have surgery. So you want him to have a few weeks to just get used to what it takes to get ready for a game. And I understand that he was slowly progressing in terms of his participation in practice, but I thought the way the Giants handled McKinney was a big part of why he was able to have some success in the latter part of the season. It wasn't as if they said, McKinney, you're our savior, and if we're going to get into the playoffs, we're going to need you to perform like a Pro Bowler, and that means that we're going to line you up as a starter, and there's not going to be any incubation period, okay, for the lack of a better term. So I was quite pleased with how the Giants handled that, and that's why, once again, you like the early results, but once again, I want to hesitate in crowning an individual and saying, okay, well, he's going to be able to pick up exactly where he left off. Here's the good news for the Giants. The good news is between Peppers, Logan Ryan, and McKinney, I think Patrick Graham is saying to himself, I've got 3 guys that I could put at safety, and then I have 3 guys that I could also experiment a little bit near the line of scrimmage in the slot. And that at least feels good from his perspective, I'm sure, in saying no matter who we bring in, no matter what changes come to the defense, at least I feel like I've got a core that we could build off of where that could be the centerpiece and then everything else is a complementary component. That, I think, is probably the most encouraging sign in terms of what McKinney showed in the last few games of the season.
Yeah, and Lance, to me, those 3 guys, not to get off topic, but is the entire key to how they disguise things on defense. When you have 3 safeties that can do all 3 things you want a safety to do, play a deep zone, cover man-on-man, or play the line of scrimmage. And look, those 3 guys are better at certain roles than others or at other roles, and that's fine. But when you can trust those guys to do any of those 3 things and you line them up in different spots, that's how you can confuse offenses.
And that's why they were so successful during the course of this season. I think a lot of confusion led to the defense's success, and that was pretty much without McKinney for the bulk of it. Now all of a sudden you bring in another player, and the defenses are now going to, the offenses are going to say to themselves, well, McKinney, based on how he was utilized at Alabama, is a player that can handle the slot. He can handle deep. He can also be sent on a blitz. And you go back to how Nick Saban and company utilized him. He showed flashes in all those areas. And now I think the Giants say, okay, we got him comfortable. Now hopefully we could branch him out even further in year number 2. So, all those things, once again, are big positives. But I think, once again, he's still that player out of this entire rookie class. I include the offensive lineman because I know Shane Lemieux is also a good candidate, but who I'm probably most intrigued to see, what do they utilize to really help him spread his wings out entering a full, what we hope is going to be a full season, assuming that he's fully healthy?
Yeah, I agree, and I think he's a legit shot to be the best player in the class, too. Like, I don't think that's out of the question, and your point, we haven't seen a ton of him yet, so I'm with you. I think most intriguing going into next year to answer a future Dan Salomon fact or fiction question, because that one's coming at some point. I think you make a good point. All right, let's put the foot on the accelerator here a little bit, Lance. Darnay Holmes played in 12 games this year, missed week 7 with a neck injury, missed 2 games at the end of the year with a knee. Then he didn't play in week 16. Technically a coach's decision, but I imagine the knee probably had something to do with that too. 396 of his 460 snaps came as the team's nickel cornerback in the slot. So that's his spot. He's not one of these guys who are going to move around a ton. And I thought for the most part he comported himself pretty well. Now, he wasn't asked to play a ton of man-to-man defense, which is really the most difficult thing you're going to ask a slot cornerback to do. Now, he did that in college well, so I think he should be able to do it, but I still think we need to see that a little bit more. But I think you feel pretty good about, all right, next year, we head into the year, and Darnay Holmes is our nickel cornerback. I'm cool with that, and I think you feel pretty good that he'll do a nice job.
Well, you're talking about probably one of the most experienced rookies coming out of this class, John, to your point, because when you look at snaps, Darnay Holmes got a lot of experience, a wealth of experience, I would say, over the course of this season. So that's a positive. You're not going into 2021 and you're not treating Darnay Holmes like a rookie.
Right.
Okay, McKinney has yet to graduate. Okay, McKinney's got some more coursework, okay, he's got to complete. Holmes, I think, certainly passed the majority of his classes. I think if there's one thing that if I'm Darnay Holmes, I'm looking to clean up, and I don't think this is necessarily a stunning development, John, but the penalties at the worst possible time came back to bite him, whether it be a holding penalty that gave the opposition a key first down. The Niners game, for example, is one that comes to mind where I believe it was a very lengthy third down, I want to say, and all of a sudden the Niners now have a fresh set of downs. So those are the things that I think come to light, the just mental mistakes at times at a key percentage or key component to the game. I have the penalty tally up just to give you an idea. Cam Fleming led all players with 7. By the way, these are accepted penalties, just to note that. Andrew Thomas was second with 6, and then Darnay Holmes was tied for third with Daniel Jones and Kevin Zeitler at 5 apiece. So, those are the types of things I think Darnay Holmes, if my biggest takeaway is from his rookie year, those knowing when the time of the game is, knowing the down and distance, and realizing when to be aggressive, John, versus, okay, when do you feel as if you have a little bit more leeway and flexibility to say, hey, I could give the guy some room, I could allow him to get the catch as long as I'm in a position to make the key tackle.
Yeah, that's a big thing they focus on defensively, too. They talked about it a lot early in the year, getting those defensive backs not to be too handsy. That was something they talked a lot about during training camp, and that's something I agree he has to work on. All right, let's go to the linebackers. Let's go to the 2 outside linebackers first, Lance. Cam Brown, Carter Coughlin. Those are 2 guys that, to me, flash some athleticism and some ability. Coughlin specifically played a lot of snaps in back-to-back games, end of the year. It was the Seattle and Cleveland games. And I think both guys have a role as edge players. Now, I think the tricky thing is figuring out how and when to use them because they're both undersized a little bit. I see Coughlin as more of a pass rusher type. I see Cam Brown, frankly, more suited as kind of an off-ball linebacker that can run in space a little bit, stop to run, cover a little bit. So I think not sure either one of those guys are going to develop into full-time players. Maybe Coughlin could become a quote-unquote full-time situational pass rusher. And Brown, depending on the scheme, could be used in certain spots. But I do think I see defined niche roles that these guys can fit into if the coaching staff can make it work and they can continue to improve their craft.
Yeah, situational players, probably the best way to describe these two, John. In terms of the snap count, and it was not very high. As you mentioned, there were certain portions of the season where the guys got a few more snaps, and that was a result of injury. For example, Carter Coughlin played against the Bucs. Remember, that was when he sacked Tom Brady. Cam Brown, we saw some really strong performances, I think, on special teams, and that's not surprising because he played 77% of the special team snaps. Remember, it was Cam Brown that tripped up Alex Erickson against the Bengals on that punt return late in the game that probably saved the game for the Giants, because if he doesn't trip him up, maybe the Bengals get in field goal range, or worse, maybe he returns it all the way for a touchdown. And remember, then Jabal Sheard is able to make the strip sack, and that sealed the game for the Giants. But I probably was most encouraged by Cam Brown as a special teamer, somebody that, got more and more comfortable in terms of getting guys down in open space. And I would agree with you. I think on defense, he's more of a guy where you want to give him the freedom to work maybe sideline to sideline as opposed to just say, hey, go after the quarterback, because he does have that athleticism compared to Coughlin based on what he did at Minnesota. When his sack numbers were high. I think you could get him into becoming a situational pass rusher if the snaps and the opportunities call for it. But Coughlin only played 18% of the defensive snaps, and Cam Brown came in just under 9. So these guys didn't have a lot of work on defense. So it's hard to really get an idea after this year and say, hey, this is what this guy could do well. This is what he can't do well. I was more, once again, impressed with what Cam Brown did on special teams. And I think he could be one of those key core guys for Thomas McGahee and Joe Judge as you're looking for one or two guys to say, hey, this is who we want to be on special teams. This is our identity. I think he fits under that umbrella and under that label.
Yeah, he played 320 special team snaps, Cam Brown, on all the teams. Kick return, kick coverage, punt return, punt coverage, and field goal block. So he was a core special teamer, I agree. Coughlin was mostly active as a special teams player on kick return and kick coverage, but he also played 115 or so snaps, and Coughlin played nearly twice as many defensive snaps, 194 to Brown's 93. Now, ironically, Lance, the defensive player that played really the most in terms of the guys up front in the draft class was the guy that was picked last in the draft, and that was Tay Crowder. He played the 12th most defensive snaps on the team this year. So he was very, very active. He basically established himself as the inside linebacker starter next to Blake Martinez. And that's a tough position to play as a rookie. He had some struggles here or there. I thought the Ravens game and his run fits versus Lamar Jackson was not a great game for him. But I think you liked what you saw. Blake Martinez spoke very highly about him at the end of the year. And I think he's somebody you look ahead, if he continues to improve. And again, you see big jumps from inside linebackers from their first to their second year. Maybe the Giants found themselves a starter here.
Absolutely. I thought that Tate Crowder, for the 37% of the defensive snaps that he played, he made the most of it. I think what's unfortunate about Crowder, John, is the timing in which that calf injury occurred. Because remember, it came
hamstring,
right.
I think it was hamstring.
Oh, it was a hamstring?
Yep.
Okay, I stand corrected.
That's okay.
It was the game in which he returned the fumble for a touchdown against Washington, and then all of a sudden he went on IR. I think that would have been a critical time for him to get more snaps.
I agree.
And just get more and more comfortable, because the game you brought up, the Baltimore game, remember, that's when he's pretty much just coming off of IR. And it's one of the worst possible matchups to have because of all the things you have to be concerned about coming out of the backfield for the Ravens. So the unfortunate part for Tate Crowder is the timing in which the injury came, because I think those 5 games that he wound up missing, because I believe he came in with 11 games overall this season.
He was out between weeks 7 and 12.
So those 5 games, you get a lot of valuable snaps over the course of the 5 games. I wouldn't be surprised if he probably would come in around 50% of the defensive snaps, John, if he played those 5 games.
Yeah, if not more, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah, I mean, 37%. There's no reason why he can't get a little over 50 when it's all said and done. And you feel a lot better about the volume of snaps, especially from the defensive coaching standpoint, to be able to, monitor what he did and evaluate him. So, I was very surprised, pleasantly surprised with what Crowder brought to the team, because I don't think the expectations are very high for, the very last pick of the draft, the 7th rounder. But I thought he capitalized, and maybe we could get into this, John. I don't want to get too off